Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning into this new channel, Inspirational and Motivational Faith-Based Studies. And my name is Lesley Donaldson. Thank you so much. I will be narrating through some amazing books on this channel. So the first book that we are going to read through and did the introduction for is called Kissing the Leper by Brad Jersak. It is about having eyes to see Jesus in the least of these. And so I thank you so much for tuning in, and I wonder how your morning is going today. And please, in the comments, please let me know that you have joined this study. Please let me know what you think about it. You can like and subscribe. That would be great. And if you have maybe some other friends that would like to participate in a faith-based study, this is about being kind to others, about having eyes to see others, ears to hear others. And if you hear Ruby, my little dog, she snores a little bit, so you can see I am very authentic about what I do. You can find a little bit more about me on our website at itrpolygraph.com. My husband is Ken Donaldson. He's a certified polygraph examiner. And on a channel for polygraph, we have all kinds of different videos. But this is a separate channel that we are putting together to read books and do life together with those who would like to participate in that kind of study. So this is the book that we're learning about and reading through. So if you can get one, you can get a hold of the church in Abbotsford. Brad Jersak is a pastor at a church in Abbotsford called Fresh Wind Christian Fellowship in Abbotsford. And I'm sure he has other books, or you can maybe find it online. One of my friends, Tammy, she found it online. So let's start off this morning with a couple things. I'd like to read from Jesus Calling this morning before we get started. And I would also like to just pull a scripture card and ask for God's blessing on this time. Where two or more are gathered, there God is. God is with us doing this. And so thank you very much for that. So let's just read what this says. He that doeth the will of God abideth forever. He that do the will of God abideth forever. That's 1 John 2:17. All the days, so shall thy strength be. All thy days, so thy strength be. Those two things are very important for today and our world. And I thank you for taking some time out of your day to participate in this reading and take your mind off other things in this world that have captured our thoughts and everything and maybe scared us and made us severely distracted to what is going on. And may we just have a change in our heart posture today to just see what God would like us to see about the people who are around us and in our world and how we can best help in that way. So Jesus Calling today is March 13th. So let's just read here. And this is exactly what I'm talking about as I'm reading the first sentence. In Jesus Calling from Sarah Young, March 13th, it says, "Learn to live above your circumstances. This requires focused time with me, the one who overcame the world. Trouble and distress are woven into the very fabric of this perishing world. Only my life in you can empower you to face this endless flow of problems with good cheer. As you sit quietly in my presence, I shine peace into your troubled mind and heart. Little by little, you are freed from earthly shackles and lifted up above your circumstances. You gain my perspective on your life, enabling you to distinguish between what is important and what is not. Rest in my presence, receiving joy that no one can take away from you. John 16:33 and John 16:22. And I'm so glad that Sarah Young so eloquently wrote what I was trying to say is exactly that never mind our circumstances. I thank you for taking the time today to take our mind off ourselves and our circumstances and maybe think about others and what's going on and how we can best help through God's perspective. So with that, let's open our book. And if you haven't, there is an introduction video made that just reads a little bit about this book in the beginning, what's it about and so forth. Please do go back and take a look at that. Otherwise, we are starting with the introduction on page 15. And it is written, The Blessing of Deeper Sight by Andy McPherson. It's the introduction. And it says, a saint is one who exaggerates what the world neglects. G.K. Chesterton. And so let's read. As children of God, we are saints. And yet it is often those who press in deeper to the truths of God that are considered capital S, saints by the church. They are ones who have grasped the truth and then dared to live it. They are men and women who fully believe God's promise to be close to the lowly and oppressed. And so they stand courageously to defend such people in the face of great oppression or indifference. Sometimes we exalt these people to mythical status in our churches, but I fear that we also dehumanize them in the process, pushing their contributions beyond our grasp into some godly realm where we could never follow. So we claim their blessing on our lives, perhaps wearing their image on an amulet around our necks for good luck, and then live as though the path they walked is unattainable for us mere mortals. I suspect that most saints would be aghast at such treatment, for no saint worthy of the name starts out desiring to be one. In fact, I would guess that in giving up their lives for God's sake, they have truly found themselves and would feel somewhat sheepish about being placed upon a pedestal of self-sacrifice. To see the great promises of God come alive in forgotten places and among forgotten people is the joy of the true saint. Such joy requires no reward greater than being allowed to continue to experience it. This joy is, in fact, open to all, and for all can descend to poverty, but not all ascend to riches. It's something I would like to read again to you. This joy is, in fact, open to all, for all can descend to poverty, but not all ascend to riches. A true and saintly path is one of hope for all humanity, for it is a downward path we can all follow if we can get low enough and small enough to worm through the needle's eye of insignificance into the great courtyards filled with God's treasures. I am told that I have a gift for loving people with mental and physical disabilities. Many times, people will tell me after a church service how much they enjoyed watching me move among them, hugging and blessing them. I appreciate such encouragement, but I find their praise somewhat embarrassing, since the blessing I receive back far outweighs what I give. I feel like a vampire who is encouraged for being so affectionate when in fact I have been sucking the lifeblood out of people, so to speak. Joan is a case in point. She is a mentally challenged friend who came to a Monday morning church service that we established for the disabled. She had just received her sight back through cataract surgery, and when I knelt down to welcome her, she reached out and cupped my face in her hands and just looked deeply at me. Talking is a challenge for her, yet as she mumbled away, staring into my eyes, I felt as though I was looking into the very eyes of Christ and hearing his muttered prayers. She was seeing me for the first time. As we gazed at one another, she didn't even blink, as though even a slight interruption of the sight of me was too costly. I was being seen, and I knew it. She saw nothing in me that made her want to turn away. When she eventually stopped staring at me with those brand new eyes, she put her arms around me and held me for a long time. I could feel the power of her affection as the power of God's affection for me. The amazing thing about this meeting was that it was my first meeting ever with Joan, and yet instantly the connection of care changed me. I looked at her in wonder and awe because she looked at me with wonder and awe. I could not look at her as a patient needing my care. Rather, I felt that I should sit at her feet all day after anointing them with perfume. Being seen with such clear eyes of acceptance felt so good and so right. I was no longer the blesser, but the blessed. And yet it is assumed that I am the one giving to the poor. What a mysterious twist of perspective as the kingdom next door broke into my world through Joan. Another personal presentation of God to me at this church is Alyssa. She is a gangly 6-footer with Down syndrome, a label that isn't really very helpful. She often comes up behind me, taps me on the shoulder, and wants to give me a hug. A hug most of us is something we give with certain conditions attached. Usually, our relationship with other people will determine what kind of hug can be given. Hugging someone of the opposite sex also needs to be approached differently than hugging someone of your own gender, especially in this age of caution about abuse. Age is also something to be mindful of, since hugging a child is different than hugging a brother on the battlefield. Unfortunately, these are necessary realities required to protect people's dignity and safety. Yet with Alyssa, she shows no reservations in her affection. In fact, although I don't know her very well, she seems very content to bury her face in my neck and remain there for extraordinarily long periods of time. Long arms wrapped around me, she stays close and still, like a bird safe in a down-filled nest, occasionally humming or laughing in my ear. She seems to know that she is safe when she is close to me, and I sense that if I pulled away, it would be inappropriate somehow. The fact that she feels safe enough to nuzzle in close to me without fear blesses me. I feel like I have been given something precious to protect and a special purpose to perform. Maybe this is how God feels when we tuck in close to him. Robert is another, less affectionate yet powerful ally in the arduous task of removing the scales from my eyes. He is an individual that I work with at a long-term care facility. He isn't particularly able to treat me with much tenderness at all. In fact, because his condition makes him a very tormented life, he cannot seem to treat himself with kindness either. When he gets upset, he often abuses himself to satisfy his sensory needs and to communicate his displeasure. This involves biting and hitting himself on his arms and legs, which often become raw and bloody. It is a very difficult thing to witness and often brings out despair in me. I become very angry at such a miserable condition and at my inability to fix it. After years of self-abuse, the skin on Robert's hands and arms have become thick and leathery, and because he likes to suck on his fingers to soothe himself, it is unpleasant to be within his reach. Yet when I allow compassion to move me, I come close to him. Robert's hands are often astound me. He won't even place his hands in mine, but when he does let them rest there, sometimes I see something beautiful. You are familiar with those 3D pictures that you have to stare at for a while until your brain reorients itself and the picture rises up off the page? Well, Robert's hands come into focus properly. I can see they contain the image of God. In his gnarled, broken hands, self-abused and torn hands, hands weathered by deep anxiety, hands wet with the comfort of his own mouth, I see Christ's hands. Hands that have not avoided the cost of love. Hands that have refused to be snatched away even when bitten and burned. In these rare moments when I give my imagination enough peace to see beyond the obvious, I find that my world changes. It changes because when I see the image of God in Robert, I am no longer able to judge him with my own shallow prejudices, fears, and measurements of worth. When my view of him changes, my view of everything changes. For if God can be found in such lowly hands, he can be found anywhere, even in the hands of those I consider my enemies. Maybe I can even begin to see this beautiful image in myself, in my own hands, and in my own damaged ways that I keep me far from God. The thing about Joan, Alyssa, and Robert, and the many other challenged individuals in my world, is that they expose me. This sounds negative, and it truly is when they reveal my indifference, my impatience, anger, and fear. But they also expose me to who I really am. They call forward things in my life that I like. They give me opportunity to be me, the real me. With them, I am free. They never respond to me with judgment, hatred, or fear. Even Robert, in his torment, seldom strikes out at me. His anguish is nearly always directed inward. Their grace brings out my own, and I find that I like myself more when I am with them, especially when I live in the freedom of their seemingly instant and automatic forgiveness. Their holy task is to bring out the holy in me. But this, of course, is what all saints both small and big saints are to do. I believe that my challenged friends are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to seeing beyond the obvious. In them is hidden the promise of God to inhabit cracked jars of clay. Because of their ability to live authentically broken, the Jesus in them is more easily poured out than in those who are able and motivated to hide our pain. In many ways, I see these people as the hope for healing for all of us normal ones. For in the same way that we can see God manifest through their weakness, we can see Him bring forth His power in our own unique weaknesses. I can see God in these people because they let me get close enough to them to see Him and to feel Him in them. My hope is that we develop our spiritual sight sufficiently to see each other in that same way. And I pray that the church would see those who dare to venture close to us as precious vessels of God's image, eyes that see Christ in the least of these. Wow, that's very powerful. And I'm wondering, in your life, have you volunteered and helped? Like what? In here, I have many examples that I can share with you, and I'm going to share with you. And in thinking that, I always think if I'm doing these things, everybody must be doing these things. So I would like to hear from you after you've just read through that introduction. Is there some things that you could let me know maybe in the comments that you do, that you find yourself able to, you're outside of your comfort zone, maybe you're able to help somebody else, see somebody else, maybe somebody has touched you in your life and you feel you were the one who was seen as the one who was blessed or the blesser, but actually you're the one who has been blessed by that person. It's the opposite way around, that the person who is viewed as the least of these is actually the one blessing you. I have many examples of that, and I'll share that with you, but I would like to just have you maybe think about that, because I am, and maybe we could share those comments and examples together. So let's continue reading here. This is the preface, Kissing the Leper by Brad Jersak. So let's see what Brad Jersak has to say some more about what he's saying about his book. This says, there's something wrong with the world today. I don't know what it is. Something's wrong with our eyes. We're seeing things in a different way. And God knows it ain't His. It sure ain't no surprise. That's a comment from Aerosmith. I'm sure everybody knows that. If you don't know who Aerosmith is, you're going to have to look it up. But let's keep reading. This is how God inspired me, Brother Francis, to embark upon a life of penance. When I was in sin, the sight of lepers nauseated me beyond measure. But when God Himself led me into their company, I had pity on them. When I had once become acquainted with them, what had previously nauseated me became a source of spiritual and physical consolation for me. After that, I did not wait long before leaving the world. The Testament of Saint Francis. Kissing the Leper is a book about having eyes to see. Jesus once counseled us, buy medicine for your eyes from me so that you can see, really see. Revelation 3:18. Kissing the Leper is about getting our eyes repaired from religious and cultural prejudice so that we can see Jesus in others. especially those that our world discards as the least. The title of this book was inspired by an encounter that Francis of Assisi had with Christ in a leper, recounted later in the preface. In that moment, his eyes were opened to the possibility of seeing and being Jesus among those who have traditionally been excluded from God's banqueting table. Somehow, when we turn away those we deem too sinful, too broken, too small, too poor, we expel Christ himself from our midst, as we'll see when we look at Matthew 25, our key text for this book, and also 1 John 3:16 and 17. But when we welcome those cast out of society and the church, we're also welcoming Jesus, whether we recognize him or not. Francis's conversation was brought about by seeing Jesus, Jesus's broken body, in the decomposing body of the leper. Further, in kissing the leper, Francis was also being Jesus to him. In the Apostle Paul's language, the love of Christ compelled him, both the love of Christ in Francis and his own love for Christ. Francis served and loved, yet it was truly Christ serving and loving the leper through him. Finally, like the leper, Francis finds that by meeting Jesus through the least of these, he himself is transformed. God's love often reaches out and touches us through surprising messengers, assaulting our prejudices by visiting us through modern day lepers and Samaritans who we've judged as the least and the lost. Are we alert of these visitations? Take note, the people in this book are not lepers. In God's eyes, they are not the least, not the lost, but the world, and too often the church, has treated them this way. We need God's eyes to see them as he does. Herein, I only use labels like disabled or poor or bisexual as a preface to removing those often labelless tags. Only as we know and love such marginalized people by name do we truly begin to see and know them as Jesus does. What follows in this preface are the three versions of Francis's story, each revealing important details about his encounter. Together, they set the stage for such encounters in our lives. And so there I'm going to end this reading, and I'm going to pick back up and we're going to continue to read. These are some short chapters and some really great inspirational stories about true people who are not the tags that the world says, but they are real people with real names, and God loves them. And thank you so much for tuning in. When you have time, come back and we're going to continue to read, and may we see Jesus, may we hear Jesus, and may we be Jesus to those all around us. Have a super day. Bye now.